But the problem with a quote mine is that you are not really getting the full story. You are getting what someone wants you to see. And so it really is important to sit down and actually put in the effort to try and learn at least one classical language so that you can understand what is going on. Because absolutely no translation is unbiased. And especially with a language like Latin, where there's such variance in what a word means in various situations, you really need to be able to see for yourself what it says. Now, that being said, something like that book Papalism, it does a pretty good job of addressing quote mines, even though it is itself more or less a quote mine. It's sort of an anti-quote.
Anti-quote mine, right? Quote mine, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's if a quote mine steps on it, it blows up, you know. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything you'd like to add, Jay?
Well, I would say that that's better than, like, I remember back in the day when I would kind of be going back, before I converted to Roman Catholicism, like, I have all the works of William Webster, and I went through all of those, and he kind of does this same thing where it's like, well, you've got all these quotes, but let me show you a whole bunch of quotes. And it turns into this kind of like Protestant back and forth thing with the Roman Catholic, right? And I would say that what I've noticed in Guttay and Denny, even though they're kind of dated, is that you get a better story of what's going on here. So this is actually a better approach than the William Webster Protestant back and forth just snippet thing, because Webster is not scholarly enough to even know, again, the context of the issues to the same degree that Denny illustrates in his book. So that's something that duped me when I was a Roman Catholic. I was actually duped by a lot of these kind of quote mine things. I thought, well, if you've got, Irenaeus saying that you got to be in communion with the first see, well, there you go. But I didn't even pay attention to the fact that that's almost always truncated. So when I actually read against heresies, I noticed that there's a lot of other things that are said by Irenaeus that the Roman Church now doesn't even accept, right? Like the reasons that he says that Rome is important because it's doubly apostolic, right? It doesn't mention a special infallible, anything like that, anything like what's in Vatican I. So you don't get the full picture of the Irenaeus quote. I know that's going to come up here in a little bit, but when I was Roman Catholic, I was just kind of duped by a lot of these things because I just read, these pop Roman Catholic apologists, and I was like, oh, well, there you go, right? It's that clear, right? It's that easy, yeah. There's nothing more to it, like open and shut case, right?
Right, and you're getting such a small sliver of the total literature that when you read a quote mine, you really do think, wow, they are always talking about St. Peter. Yep. When you actually read through an author, well, you might only get one quotation from them on St. Peter. As a note, I forgot, there are quite a few Anglicans who converted to Catholicism. Cardinal Newman, Newman was one of them who became Cardinal Newman. Yeah. Rivington, Allies. And I don't know if Allies entered the Catholic clergy, but I know that the other ones did, and they became very vocal voices. Newman, by far the most reasonable of them, or the most scholarly of them, but a lot of them just had that convert fervor that made them say really odd things. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm a convert, we're all converts here, but perhaps I'm just not that fervent. I've had a priest tell me, he goes, you need to be more fervent. I said, I'm too lazy.
Lewis, do you have more of these examples?
Of what exactly?
I thought you were gonna take us through the misused ones, like the popular misused.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to go through those in a second. I thought we would just segue for a second and talk about, because papalism on its own is all well and good for doing general apologetics, but there are individuals, and the only one I'm aware of that would actually respond to you if you brought out an argument from Denny's papalism would be someone like Eric Ibara. I actually don't know any modern Roman Catholic apologist who will actually try to respond to any counter arguments to the quote mines other than Ibara. So when someone like Ibara responds, what we are doing at Ubi Petrus is writing articles to respond to the response or to holistically refute the whole argument. So could Ubi maybe talk about the articles, why they're being written, and why it's important that why it is actually important that they are written?
For the most part, I am more into the history of the church. So that is why the focus of the articles is heavily geared towards history, right? But I recall coming across Mr. Ibara's articles about a year ago, perhaps a year and a half ago, when a friend emailed one to me and asked me what I thought of it. And the answer was, I thought this guy's historically and theologically illiterate. And so I broke one down for this friend. He goes, wow, that's great. Can I send you some more of these? And I said, yes. And I started reading them. And then he put me in touch with a few more friends of his who were very troubled by things that Ibara says. And I started to get this picture of Mr. Ibara, of his thought process. And it's very strange, in my opinion, his whole thought process. I don't really know how to describe it, but he definitely, as far as I can see, he is very concerned with trying to get Anglicans and Eastern Orthodox to convert to this sort of fantasy Catholicism. It's not real Catholicism per se. A lot of it is just, a lot of what he says is just, bad theology. Like, you can just disobey a pope. You can just, that what that pope said was heretical based on my own private judgment of what this document written 300 years ago said from a previous pope. So it's like, well, okay, what is the point of having a pope then? So I began writing articles, and hopefully they do some good. And if they don't, at least I'm entertained.
What do you think is now? So Eric is kind of getting the reputation of being a leading online or Roman Catholic apologist. What do you think is the biggest problem, other than the sort of illiteracy when it comes to the theological issues? I mean, in my personal experience, I used to argue with Eric, over the past 3 years, mainly over theological issues: the essence, energy distinction, filioque, energetic manifestation. We would go back and forth. And I noticed that you could really make you would make progress, and then the next day it was like you never even had that discussion. What do you think the biggest flaw in his apologetic is? That divide between like the Catholicism in my mind, where I have a trad Catholicism that I think Catholicism is that doesn't match up to the real world, or is it his historical errors, or what's the biggest problem with the whole Ibara approach?
What I pick up on right away is the historical illiteracy.
Okay.
That's what I pick up on. But the reason why people turn to this guy is that he spends a lot of time trying to build up his own credibility in lieu of actual argument. So he comes out, he presents all these quotations that he's taken from other books, oftentimes without citing them. And he just says, well, it comes from Mansi, it comes from Migne, it comes from whatever collection, without saying that he got this out of a quote mine. Sort of prancing about as someone important, thinks he can get people to listen to him. And I don't know if he does this out of insecurity about his own Catholicism. Personally, I do not think that he is insecure in Catholicism. I think that he's a very convinced Roman Catholic, and he is probably a very full Roman Catholic to his abilities. But I do not think that he accurately represents history or theology of either group. And I think that he is very afraid of what is happening in the Catholic Church now,
right,
and does not quite understand why it is happening, and perhaps trying to get people to convert to bolster his own insecurities about the state of the Catholic Church.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I never thought about that. That like if you could kind of convince people, then it's maybe that functions like a kind of salve to your own doubts and inner worries about, after Pachamama. Like, I can't imagine any of the trads not having some doubts if they're honest with themselves.
Right. And I mean, when I was, I not from birth, but shortly after birth, when I was baptized until about age 20, I was Roman Catholic. And you start to realize, I mean, things are really falling apart. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How is this happening? And so I can understand where he is coming from, but I think that he has a very... I think my opinion is that his ego is just way too involved in it.
So what about Lewis? Where do you want to take us now? Did you want to get into the specifics of Ibara, or do we have more of the misused quotes?
What would you prefer?
Either
we
one,
have a fair amount of time, so what was the first option? Sorry, there was the specifics of the quotes and
the issues with Ibara.
Why don't we talk a bit more about Ibara after we've done some of these quote mines?
Yeah, Go ahead. What's the next one?
All right. So we're going to do 3 popularly cited. These are probably some of the most popular. So the first one is the one that Dr. Taylor Marshall uses in his stream with Flanders. He says, so you see, as early as the 3rd century, 2nd, 3rd centuries, we have Pope Saint Victor, who threatens to excommunicate all of Asia Minor over the date of Easter. How based of him. Now, what are the issues with this? This is a very small part of the entire picture, is it not, Ubi?
It is. It is a very small part of the picture, and you regularly had bishops and, synods, really. Okay, so the story goes, we only know about this from Eusebius's history.
The same stream key, so hopefully this will work. Sorry about that. So I was so engrossed in Ubi and Lewis's soothing voices coming through these microphones that I was in a trance. I didn't even realize that the battery was dying and the laptop was unplugged. So sorry about that. We're back. Pope Victor, refresh us here.
Let me reinstate the train of thought Ubi had. So Pope Victor asks synods to issue their understanding of the tradition, and then he endeavors to excommunicate Asia Minor.
Yeah, so he does this, and first he's criticized by Saint Irenaeus, this saint who supposedly said that you always have to agree with Rome. Right?
Good point. Yeah.
Right, Saint Irenaeus goes, you really shouldn't do that. Second, we know that synods of bishops were regularly issuing depositions towards other synods and other individuals. We know that this was fairly standard. A very famous example of this would be Dioscorus of Alexandria at the Council of Ephesus, the Second Council in 449. He issues a series of depositions against Domnus of Antioch, Theodoret, Flavian, and other bishops who did not agree with him. And the depositions were considered valid enough that Chalcedon feels the need to canonically reverse them. We know that St. Cyril of Alexandria, telling the story about John of Antioch coming to the Council of Ephesus, he states that many of the bishops of John of Antioch had been deposed from their sees. Okay, well, who deposed them? If John of Antioch, their patriarch, deposed them, why would he bring them to a council? It had to be someone outside Antioch that did it. We know, for example, that during the Origen of Alexandria, long after he had left Alexandria, when he was actually ordained by someone else. And this is in the 200s. When he was ordained outside Egypt, he was deposed by an Egyptian synod. It was nothing new. I mean, there are a bunch of examples of this in an article that we did on St. Cyril. It's fairly standard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'd just like to add to that, just a little bit more background as I've understood it and read it, is that in about 157 AD, the Pope spoke to St. Polycarp. So St. Polycarp came to Rome to talk to the Pope about the differences on the day of Easter. And St. Irenaeus basically says that despite the disagreement, they still maintain communion. Now, note that this refutes the true Orthodox because they schism over the calendar. But apparently there's no need for schism over the day of Easter. Mm-hmm. So how's that? And the following two popes essentially required the Orientals to celebrate Easter, but on their date, but only in the local churches where that date was so, because before they were celebrating it on 14th Nisan, despite the local churches say they were leaving Asia Minor, local churches were celebrating it on the other way it was being celebrated. And I think there's a good point, is that despite the excommunication threat, so before the actual excommunication is made, there's a threat made. Bishop Polycrates of Ephesus states that those above him, i.e. the apostles, from whom they received the tradition, it was supposedly the Apostle John. Huh? Oh, I can hear myself, sorry. Those above him say that, quote, we ought to obey God rather than man, unquote. So Bishop Polycrates is responding to the Pope saying, well, the apostles gave us this tradition, so we obey God, we don't obey man. And even after Pope Victor excommunicated the Asia Minor churches, the other bishops didn't follow his lead. They rebuked him. Now, when the Pope excommunicates someone today, they're out of the church. It doesn't matter what the local churches in the Roman Catholic Church say. So the last point would just be to make that the action of excommunication actually was preceded by synodal decisions, synodal conclusions. So this isn't an exercise of immediate jurisdiction as well, even if it were an extraordinary instance. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I would say that sounds good.
Okay. So anything you want to add, Jay? Or
no, it's just if you have the Gate book, he says a lot of the same stuff. He's really good. Pages 58, 59, 60. He covers the fact that it really doesn't work then to turn around and use Irenaeus as a proof of papal infallibility. We're about to move on to St. Irenaeus now. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a quote
I'm
from St. Irenaeus.
saying that the Victor incident doesn't work because...
Right.
Go ahead.
All right, no, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. I'm just pointing out that Gate makes that point very well and talks about how you'll find them, Polycarp and Irenaeus, writing in the same kind of way with the same level of authority as the other bishops and the Bishop of Rome. So even though he's saying there's a requirement to be in unity, and because of the preeminence of Rome, the reason that he gives that Rome is preeminent is actually later condemned as a basis for Rome's preeminence. Like, you can't say that the preeminence is Peter and Paul, according to the Roman Catholic dogma. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's in Denzinger, isn't it? As far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So they're essentially condemning the view that Irenaeus had for the reason that Rome has primacy, which is ironic because he's supposed to be the proof of Roman primacy. One of them.
And as we're going to move on to St. Irenaeus, this quote that we're giving you from St. Irenaeus, that is a very popular one for papal infallibility, is the only quote they can muster from St. Irenaeus, by the way. So this is the quote from St. This is the proof text from St. Irenaeus. It's the only one. So the quote goes, it's from Against Heresies, and it says, quote, "Since, however, it would be very tedious in such a volume as this to reckon up the succession of all the churches, we do put to confusion all those who, in whatever manner, whether by an evil self-pleasing, by vainglory, or by blindness and perverse opinion, assemble in unauthorized meetings. We do this, I say, by indicating that tradition derived from the apostles of the very great, the very ancient and universally known church founded and organized at Rome by the two most glorious apostles, Peter and Paul, as also by pointing out the faith preached to men, which comes down to our time by means of the successions of the bishops." And this is the clincher according to the Roman Catholic, quote, "For it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church on account of its preeminent authority," unquote. Now, there's a lot of, as I understand, we really have to go into the Latin here. So, Ubi, take it away.
Yeah, it's a... The issue is, okay, so the Latin word convenire, yeah, it can mean to agree with, it can mean to come together. It's where we get the word convenient, right? It's something that's easy because it all comes together at one point. It's agreeable. But there's really no consensus on what Saint Irenaeus meant in this situation, because the form of the verb that he uses is convenire ad. Well, convenire ad means to resort to. There's no other translation for it. So it is not clear what he is trying to say exactly. And I have seen some really, and I mean really, tortured attempts at trying to make sense of it. And I don't find any of them convincing. All I do know is that the Latin is unclear.
Could you talk a little bit about the concept of the princeps?
Oh, it means preeminent, sort of like preeminent jurisdiction, you could say.
I think a good point is that the reason why St. Irenaeus mentions Rome is because he says it would take too long to enumerate all the successions of the churches. So he's refuting the Gnostics, and he's citing antiquity and universality to prove the authority of tradition, so that refutes the Protestants anyway. And he says that it would be too long to give a succession of all the churches. So he chooses Rome as an example out of convenience, really, in his argument, I would say.
Right.
And it seems that from the Roman Catholic view, he's kind of enforcing a moral obligation to agree with the church. But this would be kind of superfluous, since his whole argument is based around all the sees that he doesn't enumerate having the same faith based on tradition and antiquity and universality.
Well, and we know Rome had the honor of spotless orthodoxy for a long time, so it would make perfect sense that he would do that. And in fact, he seems to stress that it's the faith of the Roman Church that we're talking about here. Because he says that the tradition that's derived from the apostles. So if you read all of book 3, he's pretty consistently talking about a specific tradition. If you look over into chapter 4, section 2, when he continues to talk about the apostolic doctrine, the apostolic tradition, it's for him, it's scripture and tradition, right? So it doesn't really have anything to do with a special preeminence to just the successors in Rome. So he's pointing out apostolic succession, and he's going to argue throughout the whole book that the church is built on scriptures, tradition, apostolic succession, and the sacraments, right? So these are sort of a 3-tiered stool of the church, you could say, the 3 legs of the stool. So, and that's why he'll talk about Polycarp and Polycarp passing on tradition to his successors, and he finds it, as you said, most convenient to cite the Roman Church because the Roman Church was known, as you said, for spotless orthodoxy. But the actual thing that's being passed down here, that's being confessed, is the faith. He says that the faith that's preached from them, right? So there's a need to hold to the faith that is preached by the most obvious example of a doubly apostolic church, right? Rome, Peter and Paul. There's no way that both Peter and Paul are going to be teaching false doctrine, right? So they're going to have a true doctrine. And so he's saying we need to adhere to the faith of the Church of Rome, because the Church of Rome had an Orthodox faith. And you'll see the same type of argument used by St. Maximus, right? He'll use that same type of argumentation. But that is not the same thing as a promise of total infallibility, total jurisdiction by the very actions of Irenaeus himself. We know that.
And the section that the Roman Catholics translate as "every church must agree with the Church of Rome" is, as Ubi says, can be translated as to resort to. Now, in Edward Denny's book Papalism, he explains this as being like an actual convening of the peoples to the See of Rome itself, like a physical journey. As I understand it, and he uses a parallel in St. Gregory of Nazianzen, who in his orations, and this is retrieved from Denny's book, and St. Gregory says, quote, this is about Constantinople. He says, quote, "The eye of the world, i.e. Constantinople, the bond between East and West, to which the extremities of the earth resort from all quarters, and from which they start afresh as from a common emporium of the faith," unquote. So because St. Irenaeus is refuting the Gnostics, he's basically saying, well, let's prove it. Let's bring people, all the churches, all the bishops come to the Church of Rome, because it's the capital of the empire. And all the bishops and all the faithful come to the Church of Rome, and we'll look at our traditions, and we'll see who has the wrong tradition based on the apostolic succession. Would you like to correct me on anything, Ubi, or have I got that right?
I'm not really convinced by any of the arguments about, well, it actually means, that you have to show up there, this or that. I think that it is just one of these statements that is vague. It does not mean anything about agreeing with it. It's just a statement that it's lost in translation permanently.
I think one good point though would be to make that if St. Irenaeus was having an issue with the Gnostics, why didn't he just appeal to the Pope directly to make an infallible statement to deal with them?
Right, but I mean, I'm not an expert in Latin, right? I'm really I'm a simple person, right? I'm one of the little people, and I know that there is a tremendous debate among scholars of Latin about what is actually meant. And I know that as of the last 100 or so years, slowly you have seen even Roman Catholic translations switch more towards resort to.
Yeah.
As opposed to agree with.
Anything else on St. Irenaeus? Nope. Okay.
Well, I would just say that there's no mention of the Vatican I idea here, and so in other words, you're going to read Irenaeus here as you can read it in an Orthodox way, or you can read it in a traditional Roman Catholic way, from your presupposition. I'm not saying the Roman Catholic position is true. I'm saying that Orthodox can read this in the exact same way and come away with it being Orthodox, and then because again, Rome is Orthodox in this period, right? Or you can come away with this, presuming the Vatican I view. But I don't think that either one of those is definitive, because, like I said, even Goethe, even in his day, he talked about how there were differing translations of this text. So this has been known and debated for a long time, which the Latin, that's way out of my purview. I don't know Latin, so I can't comment on that. But just the text itself is problematic from the Vatican I view. Because the importance that's attached here is not on the basis of any divine prerogatives, but it's on the basis of being doubly apostolic. It would be good to find that section in Denzinger if I could. If anybody in the chat knows, like, there's a specific statement, I think it's in Vatican I, or it's in Satis Cognitum, I think. But it specifically rejects the idea that the importance and power and supremacy of the Bishop of Rome has anything to do with Paul at all. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a specific rejection.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I might try and find it as we move on here.
Anyway,
so the third one we wanted to look at was Saint Cyprian or Saint Cyprian, and the quote goes like this. This is the one I've chosen. Quote, "With a false bishop appointed for themselves by heretics, they dare even to set sail and carry letters from schismatics and blasphemers to the chair of Peter and the principal church, in which sacerdotal unity has its source. Nor did they take thought that these are Romans, whose faith was praised by the preaching apostle, and among whom it is not possible for perfidy to have entrance." Would you like to explain sacerdotal unity, Ubi?
Well, the See of Rome was very large and very important, and because of that, they were a source of unity in the sense that if you were going from, say, North Africa to Gaul, the Church of Rome knew who the bishops were in northern Italy and Gaul, and it also knew who they were in, say, North Africa. In North Africa, you might not know who the bishops were in Gaul, although St. Cyprian does write a letter to Pope St. Stephen about this, about a bishop in Gaul later. But example being, Rome and other large churches kept lists of the bishops they were in communion with. Furthermore, and back to St. Cyprian's idea about all bishops being, well, not his idea, but he utilizes it, about all bishops being Peter. If the body of St. Peter is in Rome, that is where St. Peter resides. His relics are laid to rest there. And so St. Peter, being the source of sacerdotal unity, well, he's in Rome. It's where it springs from his relics, which are in Rome. But there is a point that is made. He talks about to the chair of Peter and to the principal church. He talks about them as if they're two separate categories. If the chair of Peter was the principal church, he would not be putting "and" in between those. He would be saying it is the chair of Peter, the principal church. Instead, it's like saying, this is Jay Dyer. He is a podcaster and a film critic, right? Well, those are not the same thing. You wouldn't say Jay is a podcaster, a film critic. Well, what do you mean? It doesn't quite make sense without the "and" there because they're separate categories. Rome is the See of Peter par excellence, but the chair of Peter is the bishop's chair. And the reason why St. Cyprian ends up spending so much time mentioning Rome is because the schism of Novatian, it starts in Rome. It is centered there because Novatian was an anti-pope.
Right. Good point. Yeah.
I found the citation from Denzinger. It's Denzinger 1091, by the way. Go ahead.
Can you read it, what it says, or is it long?
No, it's not that long. Error of the dual head of the church, Innocent X, from the Decree of Sacred Office, 1647. The Most Holy, ellipses, has decreed and declared heretical this proposition so presented that it established an exact equality between St. Peter and St. Paul without subordination and subjection of St. Paul to St. Peter in supreme power and in the rule of the universal church. St. Peter and St. Paul are the two princes of the church who form one head, or there are two Catholic heads and supreme leaders of the Catholic Church, joined in highest unity between themselves, or the head of the Catholic Church consists of two who are most divinely united into one, or there are two supreme pastors and guardians of the Church who form one head only. Those are all condemned propositions.
And I got my Denzinger out. It was Denzinger what?
1091.
1091, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't have anything in particular to talk about. Saint Cyprian. Maybe I could either bring up another quote or maybe we could talk about why Saint Cyprian is kind of really an awful father to cite for the papal case in terms of how he behaved in Africa.
He disagreed with Stephen famously on the issue of baptism. Guttay has, just summarizing Guttay, he points out that Rome's honor is one of a juridical or unitive focus. It is not mentioned to be divine right or necessarily infallible. The charism is not ever mentioned to be a perpetuity. He disagreed with Stephen. There's no automatic acceptance of Rome in the mindset of Saint Cyprian. And then later on, Jerusalem is mentioned as the mother and model church, which is an interesting point. The actions of the Bishop of Rome, according to St. Cyprian, are not viewed as universally binding. The Petrine office of Peter is, according to St. Cyprian, literally held by all the bishops. They all have the, quote, same honor and same authority, which is a direct quote from him. Constantine called Jerusalem the mother church. The church rejects Rome's pretensions in this matter. So, yeah, I think that's how I would respond to it. But
you have something else as well. Saint Cyprian calls. It's oftentimes alleged that he called Rome the root or the radix in Latin, but in letters 72, in which he's writing to another bishop and describing, it was written right before he was excommunicated by Stephen. In talking about why he clings to rebaptism, he says, for those of us who cling to the root. Well, he's in staunch disagreement with the root, apparently, if the root is the Pope. So how is he clinging to what he's in staunch disagreement with? That's in letter 72.
Okay, excellent. That's a good point. Yeah, you'll find that when you start to really think out the implications of this and put it in the context, that a lot of these usages don't even make sense with the rest of the lives of these people or the rest of the writings of these people. Like they directly contradict themselves. And so,
especially considering Saint Cyprian died out of communion with Rome.
Good point. Yeah.
There is no evidence that he came back into communion with Rome. None.
What's the next quote?
We can do another Saint Cyprian one. I only had 3 written down.
Okay.
I could just pull one up, maybe. I don't know. I prepared for those 3, but if Ubi thinks he can do one on the fly.
What about that later council that Ibara had mentioned? Is that in our notes?
The Synod of 861.
Yeah.
So the one where Ibara makes the argument that the papal legates come and intervene in the Council of 861 without an appeal.
Yeah.
And the Eastern bishops seem to have no problem with that. Ubi, do you feel like you've kind of revised this in your head enough to talk about it?
Reviewed it. Well, you could say that. I'm really inarticulate, and when I get caught on the, like, what do you think about this? I kind of like, what? If I recall correctly, there was no appeal. There was an alleged appeal, but the bishops did not come and say, we are going to judge. What they did was they came and they asked if they could review the case. And St. Photius and the emperor, not wanting a problem, because they could have said no, just said, yeah, sure. Because their goal at that time was to get St. Photius, his situation smoothed out with Rome. And telling the legates, no, take a hike, would have inflamed the situation. So saying, yes, you are free to review the case, was the peaceable way.
It's dealt with. It's dealt with by Denny on page 463. If people are interested in that, they can go to that. But go ahead.
Oh, that was all I had to say. I know a lot of the times it is argued that there was an appeal, and I would have to go look that up off the top of my head.
Yeah, we'll have we'll maybe have an article about that at some point.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe if I mean, we've gotten quite a few requests as of late for articles on Saint Photius.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to? Maybe I'll just do. Maybe I can do one. Why don't we talk about the Tome of Leo? So that's just something we've written about. Ubi's written about. So, sorry, I say we because I feel like whenever I edit the articles. Yes. So the Roman Catholic will argue that Pope Leo essentially decreed an ex cathedra to Chalcedon in his tome, and it was submitted to as an ex cathedra would be submitted to.
Now let's stress too that Ibara hung a lot on this claim, by the way.
He did. Well, it's in the so at the First Vatican Council, there's a relatio, the official interpretation of Pastor Eternus, and it cites 3 examples, and it has been a while since I read this, but it cites 3 examples of papal infallibility in the past. And I believe, and do not quote me on this, all 3 of those examples came from the 2nd millennium, not the 1st. And the Catholic Church does not recognize the tome as ex cathedra. Now, when I wrote the initial article, Ibara, he understood it as ex cathedra. He then tried to deny that, and I had a screenshot of him saying that it was, and I included that in the rejoinder. So he tried to back out of it. But no, the tome itself, I mean, you can read the articles, the exchange. They're much more detailed, and in speech, I'm very...
I have by the way, everybody, I have Ubi's blog linked below, so when you're watching this in the future, the link is down there. You can see there's multiple articles, so it's sort of dealing one by one with different claims from Ibara, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm very inarticulate in speech, so I prefer to write because it takes me a while for thoughts to come to me. Mm-hmm. My mother said I was stupid. The teacher said, maybe just a little slow, but, it takes me a while.
No, that's fine.